Now we're going to go over the Declaration of Independence. Does that make sense, though? You get this timeline. You got Virginia coming on the scene, corporation, King James. You got King George the First, King George the Second, who are completely German, don't care nothing about the colonies. They gave legislative authority over to these random people. Well, what he would think would be, okay, well, there's England. They're writing laws for England. Cool, whatever. Okay, no. These people called the Jesuits showed up, took over Parliament, took over the legislative will under fake pretended acts. They said, oh, yeah, we passed a law that allowed these. Yeah, they're going to help us clean everything up. No. And then by the time you get to King George the Third, well, he's half German. He still cares about Germany. He's still got German connections. He's the Prince of Germany. And so these legislators come and get in his ear and say, hey, these boys, they think they don't have to pay no taxes out here. They think they're above laws. They think they don't have to obey law. These sovereign citizens out here think they don't have to give us the fruits of their labor. And so we need you to send them boys out and go and start collecting and taking property and making sure that you, King George the Third, get what you're owed. And so this is the leading points up into the Declaration of Independence and the War of Independence. Okay? All right, let's get into it. I thought there was something else I was going to say. But yeah, that's it. Let's go to the Declaration of Independence. All right, so the Declaration of Independence is wrote and written into three parts. The first part is reasons why anyone would break off from their country. All right, so obviously it says when in the course of human events. So it says the unanimous declaration of 13 United States of America. That would have been the first time that phrase would have been used. Oh, somebody took some money from me. Oh, they gave some money back. All right. The 13 unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. They say when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one to dissolve political bands which have connected them with one another and to assume among the powers of the earth. They said nobody's coming to help us. So we got to go to the only one who might be able to help us. So they said assume among the powers of the earth that separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and the nature's God entitle them. So they said this is what anybody would do in this situation. We want to let you know this is why we're doing it, but this is reasons why anybody would do it. That we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And they tell you that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. So they tell you, what is the purpose of government? To secure rights. That is their job, to secure rights. They said that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And they say that whenever any form of government, like people, I don't say this with any shame or any judgment, but we think that, well, the Declaration of Independence was the first time they ever would. No. This is the third draft. They're like, all right, you got to clean it up one more time for us. Right? They tell you, okay, well, this thing didn't magically start on 1776, right? They said, technically it started in the 1700s. I mean, I'm sure you can study any nation, any country, and they're going to have beef between the people and governments. They say there won't be a perfect government until Christ comes back. But until then, we got issues here, and we need to solve them. All right? And so they say, hey, this ain't the first time we're doing this. This ain't the first time we've complained about this. This ain't the first time this ain't the magical, okay, well, we'll just do it on July. No. They said they were dropping bodies in 1774. So they said, okay, well, now we gotta make it official. So they said that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, what destruction? Taking away people's rights. It is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it. That's what the Supreme Court of Texas and the Constitution of Texas says. They said in the Texas Constitution, it says that the people have the absolute right to abolish or alter their government. Just like they did in the Declaration of Independence. They said whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. All right, so that's what the first thing of the first part of the Declaration of Independence is about. These are reasons why anybody would separate from their government. I tell people all the time, well, the real law of the land is the common law of England. And people say, oh, well, I knew we were still under Britain. I'm like, no, you're ignorant. You don't know what you're talking about. Why would they, after they said, hey, well, this is the reason we're separating, would still want the laws? Well, because the government wasn't obeying the laws. There was nothing wrong to them with the common law of England. They said that's the thing we wanted. That's the thing they're taking away. That's the thing they got rid of in Canada. Okay, and if we don't put up a fight, they're going to do it here. And so they said this is reasons why anybody would do this, because they're taking away our rights and they're not obeying the law, right? And I want to stress this point. They did all this. Remember, I went over this at the beginning of the live, but they had a whole reality, a whole history where under a monarchy, under the common law of England, they were, you know, obviously they had conflicts. No part of history is perfect. But again, they were happy with their laws. They said, yeah, we want this trial by jury thing. Yeah, we don't want some random dude we don't know in a black robe just taking away people's property and putting people in prison where there's no injured party. Yeah, we don't like that. Nobody would like that. Right? And so they said, like, hey, there's a reason why when this random black guy gets on YouTube and TikTok and says, hey, this common law of England thing, you probably want to pay attention to it, because if they had this supposedly revolutionary war and you get on the other side of this revolutionary war and they're saying, oh, well, the real law is actually the common law of England. Well, why would that be significant to them? Okay, because that was the thing they believed best protected their rights. So when some random black on the internet says, hey, the common law of England may be the real law, you might want to look into that. And then some people say, oh, well, there's no way it could be. We broke off from England. Well, you don't know why they broke off from England, or you're obfuscating the truth and not telling the real reason why they broke off from England. They tell you in 1774 why they broke off from England, because Rome invaded the English Parliament and started writing fake laws. They called it pretended legislation. They say it. Under the pretended acts of Rome, these Jesuits took over the Parliament and took over the books of the law and the proceedings of the court under the pretended jurisdiction of Rome. Well, they don't have no real jurisdiction in England. Right? They've never been entitled to England. And under pretended acts of Parliament. Right? So these are all fake acts. People tell me all the time, yeah, well, in 1913 and 1933, the executive order took away all the gold, so that means they magically have to pay bills that you should have never had in the beginning. I'm like, what? Okay, well, there's no such thing as an executive order in the Constitution. So it's all fake, pretended legislation. It's not real. It's not authorized by law, right? So you get to the second part of the Declaration of Independence. The second part of the Declaration of Independence is a list of grievances against King George III or against the British government, okay? The first thing they tell you. So let me see, yada, yada, yada. The right to alter, abolish, and institute new government, laying its foundations on such principles, yada, yada, yada. Safety, happiness, prudence. Yeah. He real nice with it. He real nice with it. All right, here you go. It says the history of the present king of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. He says, and I need to say this too, a declaration is a legal term. This is a legal document to them. To these people, they said, to prove these facts, or to prove this, let these facts be submitted to a candid world. Okay, well, when you go in court and somebody makes a complaint against you, well, they have to do that. They have to prove the facts of the case, of what actually happened in a what they call it, not a complaint, I can't think of the word, but they make a complaint against you. All right, well, that's why they have to have an injured party. That's what they say. What they say, repeated injuries and usurpations. Okay, well, that's why in today you have to have an injured party. These are some of the inklings of English law. Okay, you can't go before the court of the world and appeal to the supreme judge of the world, which are all statements in the Declaration of Independence, and not have an injured party who has, what they say, given them a history of repeated injuries, and then they write those injuries down and submit them as the reason why they are administering justice according to the laws of nature and of nature's God that entitle them. Okay, so this is a legal document. They said, and the proof of that is, they say to prove this, let these facts be submitted. So when you get somebody who makes a complaint, you have to verify all those facts to see if they have been alleged, that's the word I was looking for, to be true. Okay? It says that King George has refused his assent to laws. The first thing they say is he don't obey the law. They told you in 1774. Okay, well, they getting rid of laws in other places, and he ain't even obeying them in here. They said our problem was not with the law. See, these Parliament guys, these Jesuits, I need to write that down. Jesuits went to King George III and said, oh, these people think they don't have to obey laws. They said, no, we have a law. It's called due process. It's called you're not allowed to take our property and our stuff and put us in prison without a jury of our peers. They said that's the law. That's from the Magna Carta. They said that was before the Magna Carta. This is just a backdrop for me. Sorry. And I don't know how to move it, because if I move it a certain way, the light from the monitor is going to get on the board. So, sorry. But they said, yeah, these boys think they don't have to obey laws. They think they above all this stuff. They think they can work and not give us any of it. They said, no. This guy is not obeying the law, because in order for you to take our stuff, you have to submit this to the community. The people are the ones that are in charge here in these colonies. We don't work for Parliament. And clearly Parliament don't work for us. And because of that, King George has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. They said, let me see, I'm not going to read all these, but it says again, he's refused to pass other laws. They say it 3 times. Let me see. There you go. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws establishing judiciary powers. He has made the judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out our substance. Sound familiar? What else? He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislators. They said they was writing laws, but it wasn't with the consent of the legislator. It was the real legislator, not these Jesuit guys that showed up and took over. They said we didn't have a problem with writing statutes. They said we had a problem with foreigners writing our statutes. Uh-oh. He has kept among yada yada yada. The consent of our legislators, he has effected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. Here we go. My favorite sentence in the whole Declaration of Independence. I'm going to spend the next 3 hours on this one sentence. I'm just kidding. It says that King George has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution. Remember, 1774, they named names. They not putting up with it. They said the Roman Catholic Church did this. In 1775, he cleans it up a little bit and says, oh, okay, this thing called Admiralty is the thing that's passing these statutes. And then when you get to 1776, he says, oh, okay, well, King George has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction that's foreign to our Constitution. What was their Constitution? The Magna Carta. That says you cannot bring people into court. First of all, the Magna Carta is nasty. I'm going to do a whole thing about the Magna Carta. In the Magna Carta, it says that the sheriff, the bailiff, whoever is an officer or agent of the king is not allowed to just go after people and bring them into the courts of common pleas or courts of the king's bench, whatever it said. So that they say you were not allowed to just create court cases where there is no injured party. And then obviously you got the due process clause where they say, hey, you're not allowed to take our property or put us in prison unless it is by the judgment of our peers. I'm here every day, so I live stream almost every day. Unless I'm out of town, I live stream every day. So I'm knocking it out. A lot of these videos, I just started making videos again, but I went over the first part of the common law, the timeline of the common law. This is part 3 technically. So I went over the first part of the common law, which was the year 510 BC up until 1066. Then we went from 1066 to what? To the 1700s. We talked about William Blackstone. And now I'm just going over another timeline, the 1600s, just getting deep into the 1700s to understand how did we get to the Declaration of Independence. And then I'm probably going to make a couple videos on the Constitution. And then I'm just going to go head on into each major point of the common law of England. So I'll be here every night. And Lord willing, I'll be here every night until I run out of money and I got to go back to work. They said, let's drain his bank accounts tonight. So they said, King George has combined with others. Okay, well, in 1774, they tell us who those others were. They called it the Roman Catholic religion. Well, really, they told you in the 1730s, which is the same people, but they call these guys the Jesuits. And then you got these people in 1774 called the Roman Catholic religion. He said, okay, well, you got these people called the Admiralty. Yeah, the courts of Admiralty extending beyond their ancient limits. And then in the Declaration of Independence, he says, well, King George is actually combined with others. So now they're others. He got to clean it up. They cannot fight everybody at this point. We don't realize this, but that's the United Nations before there's such thing as a United Nations. If Thomas Jefferson runs his mouth inappropriately, okay, all of it gets wiped out way too soon. Okay? So he says King George is combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution, the Magna Carta, and unacknowledged by our laws, the common law of England. And he has, there he goes again. He says it 3 times so far. He says that King George has refused his assent to laws, the wholesome and necessary for public good. He has, where does it say it again? Yada, yada, yada. It's somewhere in there. He says it a second time. He's refused his assent to laws. Then he says it a third time. He says, subjected us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution, unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts, somebody else's acts, of pretended legislation. Say fake laws. Quartering large body of troops among us for protecting them with a fake trial. Yeah, how many times you seen a police officer get away with abusing people? They send them on vacation. They say, you get paid with leave. You get leave with pay. That's what they call it. Leave with pay. Yeah, he's been suspended. Leave with pay. He on vacation. He's going to the Bahamas. he just put his knee on the neck for 15 minutes on national television. Yeah, he's going to the Bahamas for the weekend. For the next 3 weeks, actually, until we dismiss the case. For protecting them by a fake trial from punishments of any murders which they may commit on the inhabitants of these states. This stuff is in the Declaration of Independence, y'all. We complain of these things every day. For cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, imposing taxes on us without our consent. We know about that one. Depriving us, in many cases, of the benefits of a trial by jury. There you go. Say it again. They said for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses. They say it twice. He's given his assent to their acts of pretended legislation. He says for transporting us beyond seas for pretended offenses. And if I had time, I would teach you they didn't go nowhere. Remember, they went from having a trial by jury where the jury were the judges and the judges were the people in your neighborhood or vicinage, what they said in 1774. And now they're being transported beyond seas. Okay, well, that's an admiralty term, meaning that now instead of going before the people, you just go before a guy in a black robe. They just took him across the street. And going across the street and the people not being the judges was going beyond seas. So they didn't send them back to England. They didn't do it all. They would have killed them if that was the case. They probably did. If they really had to go back to England, yeah, we're just getting rid of this guy. So they just took him across the street and brought a guy in a black robe and said, oh, I'm the judge now. Don't worry, buddy. And then just took away his life and property. Right? So they say it. The first sentence, okay, they're depriving us of a trial by jury. The next sentence, oh, well, now they're taking us beyond. They just went across the street. So instead of the courts of common pleas, see, when you start studying this common law thing, you'll learn all that. They got 2 types of courts. They got the courts of common pleas. That would have been the common law courts where you had an injured party, you had a grand jury, you had the petite jury. The petite jury would say, okay, you're guilty. They prescribe the offense. The grand jury would actually create the case, and they would only call the sheriff to summon the jury from the neighborhood or help investigate. The grand jury would be what we now know to be, they said the FBI would be based off of the grand jury. The grand jury would have been the people, the elders of the community. They would go investigate and see if this was a real case that needed to be tried. They said, okay, well, they're depriving us of all this now. They took one dude across the street, and instead of bringing him before the people, they're bringing him before a stranger. And I got plenty of cases in law books that say, okay, well, when they went across the street to try this dude, okay, well, they're taking away his property, they're taking away his life, they're doing everything. They're establishing all these commercial entities, and it's all international. They said they would beef so bad that if they gave them a jury, okay, that jury would throw that case out. They used to beef real hard in the 1770s. It was, they said, one book I got say, okay, well, the jury would throw the case out and the king's revenue would be impaired. They would bring a revenue case, which is an admiralty case before the people because they called it a crime. Same's supposed to happen here. If they call it a crime, it's supposed to be a trial by jury. Well, in that trial by jury over a revenue issue, well, the people knew. They're like, yeah, we're not trying this. So they would throw it out and then they would just go shoot it out after the court proceeding because they weren't with it. Like they were not playing. So if you got brought before the jury over a revenue case, they said, yeah, we're not allowing this to go through. So if the grand jury don't kick it out, then by the time it get to us, we're not going to hear it. We're going to pronounce the dude innocent. That's how it's supposed to be today. But that's another story for another day. All right, so they say transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, admiralty, and then they talk about this Quebec Act in the Declaration of Independence. They say for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies. I told y'all that thing was on the Ohio River. You go look at, I think it was the Ohio River. I'm pretty sure it was the Ohio River. The Ohio River went into, I think it ultimately connected to the Mississippi. I could be wrong, but I've been on the Ohio River in Ohio and West Virginia in the oil fields up there. But I believe before it was Ohio, I believe it was a territory of New York, and that would have taken it to the Canadian USA line. But that's another story. But just know, in 1774, they're talking directly about this Quebec Act, and they said it's the Roman Catholic religion in the province of Quebec abolishing the system of English laws. Okay, in the Declaration of Independence, he had to clean it up and say, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing there an arbitrary government. They said that thing wasn't by law. That thing wasn't by the will of the king. That was by the will of the legislator. That ain't authorized by law under English law. So they said that's the Roman Catholic Church right there. So if I ask you, well, who were they really fighting during the Revolutionary War, during the War of Independence? Who were they really fighting? Because I told you, King George III said he had to contract these people called the Hessians. They were German mercenaries because he was half German. Well, the people in England wouldn't fight their cousins in the colonies. So he had to team up. They said, and I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure they said it was the Hessians, the Germans, and the Russians, and like a mixed group of these guys. But they're all working on behalf of the Roman Catholic religion. We already know who's writing the laws, so we know what the real war is about. I got another book. It's by Supreme Court Justice Joseph Story. He's got this thing called, he's dead. He's super dead. Justice Joseph Story wrote commentaries on the Constitution of the United States. It's in 3 books. The first book, he goes over the 13 colonies and how they got set up. And when he talks about New York and Massachusetts, I know this because when I read it, I was in New York and Massachusetts. He said that they used to pass laws in the colonies about these Jesuit priests. These Jesuit priests had gotten so bad that they had to execute them. That they said, especially I believe it was New York, they said it had gotten so bad that anybody who was a Jesuit or Popish priest got sent to prison. Any one of those guys who escaped prison were to be executed. That was the law. And then when you get to 1777, New York has a New York Constitution. They say in that Constitution, anybody who acknowledges the spiritual supremacy of the Pope, you getting dealt with. That's how serious it was. That any laws that were contrary to the common law of England, it was seen as direct opposition. Um, so these people were abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province. They're talking about the Roman Catholic Church. And enlarging its boundaries. They say it. They say it in 1774. This is direct quote. He just had to clean it up. And then he said, for taking away our charters, abolishing our what's our charters? The Magna Carta, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering the fundamental forms of our government. He said that's happened during this time period. He said suspending our own legislators. I'm trying to see anything else. Waging war against us. He has abdicated government here, declaring out of his protection, and then started waging when the government starts attacking the people, right? And then he says, Thomas Jefferson says, at this time, transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely parallel. I'm not gonna read all. I can't read all that. You know what I mean. You need to read what happened to the signers of the Declaration of Independence. All of them had their houses burnt down, killed their kids, stabbed their wife, burnt down their stuff, stole everything. Because on the other side, it's considered an act of war. On the other side, they said we're being invaded from foreign mercenaries, right? So they say, so that's the second part of the Declaration of Independence. It's a list of grievances against the British government and King George III, okay? And then, yada, yada, yada. I'm trying to see if anything else. He has excited domestic insurrections among us. He has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless savages whose known rule of warfare and undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. Okay, yada, yada, yada. All right, it says, in every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered with only repeated injury. A prince, remember, he was the Prince of Germany at the time, whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant, is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. They said under a king, they were considered free as long as they had that common law. So they said, nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time. How many times you heard that? How many times you seen a sovereign citizen video where these dudes are trying to fight for their rights? They're trying to argue with cops and say, hey, you're breaking the law. Hey, you're the one not obeying the law. I have a right to travel. I have a right to... Yeah, all this stuff. Yeah, all this is happening in 1776. They said, we have been giving attention to our British brethren. We have warned them, hey, the government's breaking the law. Hey, the government's breaking the law. Hey, the government's breaking the law. And time to time of attempts by their legislator to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. This stuff is not by the law. They said we don't have a problem with the law. They said the problem is they're not obeying the law. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, yada, yada, yada. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind. Enemies in war, baby. They say it's time to get to it. Time to get to it. They said strap up, boys. Actually, I forgot about this. When I first started studying this years ago, I think it was Benjamin Franklin, which... you can say what you want. I think he may have been a traitor too, but don't forget they had enemies they thought were friends and all type of stuff. So none of these guys are my friend, right? But they say Thomas Jefferson went to England and said, "Hey, we trying to work this thing out, and y'all not giving us no wiggle room." And King George III was like, "Oh, you don't understand. We're the mother country, and you guys are the subjects. You always will be our subjects. You're not obeying the law. You need to come on back," and yada, yada, yada. And Benjamin Franklin wrote the boys and said, yep, time to strap up. They act like they don't want to hear us. So And they got to it after that. And the rest is history. And I'm not going to go over this tonight, but I don't think we won the war. But that's another topic for another day. But they say, we therefore, the representatives of the United States of America and General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world. They said, we got no friends in this. The Roman Catholic religion has taken over 90% of the planet, of the known planet at the time. And they already done took over Canada. They said, that's it, boys. They said, we got to go to the Supreme Judge of the world for this one. For the rectitude of our intentions, in the name of and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states. And they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown. And that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. And that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. For the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge our lives, or pledge each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And then you got the signers of the 13 colonies, and you go study the lives of them. They all ended, most of them ended in destruction. Most of them had their houses burnt down. They were fighting in all different types of winter, so they burn your house down. That's it. You can't build another house for another. It's like a good month to get a cabin up, you know what I mean? And so kids got killed, wife kidnapped, raped, all type of stuff. So this is the story or the history of what led up to the Declaration of Independence. What I want to last go over is the argument that the Declaration of Independence is not law. You will hear from attorneys. You will hear from primarily attorneys. They're primarily they're of that order that say, oh, well, the Declaration of Independence isn't binding law. Okay, well, the United States statutes at large is federal law. It is law for the federal government concerning federal things, the federal corporation, yada, yada, yada. Okay, well, every statute at large is considered federal law. The very first citation of the United States statutes at large, actually, I can pull it up right here. I have the United States statutes at large saved on my computer. So for those who don't know the hierarchy of federal law, you have the United States Constitution, you have the United States statutes at large, then you have the United States Code, you have the United States Code of Federal Regulations, you have Supreme Court cases, federal Supreme Court cases, federal circuit court cases, federal district court cases. So technically, as it relates to federal law, you have the United States Constitution and the United States statutes at large. The United States statutes at large is the official legislation of the federal government. So if you want to ask if something is law, if it's not in the United States statutes at large, they put things that are in the code that are not in the United States statutes at large. Okay, well then it's not federal law, right? So the very first enactment of the United States statutes at large is the Declaration of Independence. So if you go to the statutes at large, it will be volume 1, page 1 of the United States statutes at large. And it says, in Congress on July 4th, 1776. It is federal law. The United States, or the Declaration of Independence, is federal law. You go to page 4. Page 5, maybe. No, that's right. Page 4 is the Articles of Confederation. You go to page, I believe, 9. So this is volume 1, page 4, volume 1, page 9, page 10. Is the United States Constitution. All of these things are federal law because it wasn't enacted in the United States statutes at large. Does that make sense? So whenever somebody tells you, oh, well, the Declaration of Independence isn't, well, is the United States statutes at large federal law? Yes or no? Okay, what was the first enactment into the United States statutes at large is the Declaration of Independence. So the reason I say that is because I can prove, and I'm going to hopefully try to prove it, there's not one accusation against King George III that is valid law in this country. Does that make sense? So we just went over a list of grievances against King George III and against the British government. And there's no way that would, after 1776, be valid law here. Does that make sense? So when they say, they got one where it says, okay, well, they get a trial by jury in civil cases. Okay, well, guess what? You get a trial by jury in civil cases in America. Because they don't get on the other side of this and say, oh, well, now we got rid of it. No, that's the law. That's what they wanted. They literally broke off from England or broke off from Great Britain because they weren't obeying the law. So they don't get on the other side of that and say, oh, well, we're just going to get completely rid of the common law of England. No, that is the law. Whatever was afforded to us by the common law of England, whatever protected our rights, primarily due process and a trial by jury, then that is the law. I'm trying to make sure. Oh, I got 11 minutes. Oh, I did it under 2 hours. Let's go. So there's not one citation against the British government that is valid as, oh, well, now it's law here. No, there's not one. So, yep, that's pretty much it. That's all I got.